That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Werewolves, the 12th film directed by Stephen C. Miller, which is being released courtesy of Briarcliff Entertainment on December 6th, 2024.
Do you know a Stephen C. Miller movie?
Unfortunately, yes.
Oh.
He has a filmography that I don't think I will be forced to watch to completion, but Escape Plan 2, Hades, is probably a standout. I have seen one of his previous films, Arsenal, from 2017, which I watched because Nicolas Cage is doing the Cage Rage bit, and so if you like that, maybe that's worth checking out. But this is by far probably his most polished film based on what I know of his previous works.
Well, I have full transparency. When you asked me if I wanted to watch this movie, because you sent me a list of new releases, and I didn't do my due diligence. I thought this movie was the one starring Christopher Abbott and Julia Garner, the Wolfman.
The new Wolfman reboot.
So I was very excited to watch this.
And I'm like, the studio will not be sending a screening link for that.
So when you put this movie on, imagine my surprise when Frank Grillo popped up.
I like Frank Grillo.
I do too. What is Werewolves about? A supermoon event triggered a latent gene in every human on the planet, causing anyone exposed to the moonlight to transform into werewolves, killing millions overnight. A year later, the world attempts to prepare for another supermoon. What is your pull quote?
While this may be Stephen C. Miller's most accomplished film to date, Werewolves is about as generic and basic as its title, playing like a hand-me-down howling knockoff spliced with watered-down purge sensibilities, a pity considering the fun practical effects of its reptilian-snouted lycanthropes.
Oh, mine. If a lycanthropic The Purge sounds good to you, you'll still likely be disappointed in Werewolves. I agree. I think the standout is the practical effects, and
they look good.
Yeah, the werewolves look fun, and isn't it a shame that this wasn't a fun film?
And the cast, and I also really like Lou Diamond Phillips, but nobody seems to be having any fun.
No. And the story is kind of silly. It's basically what I said. The opening credits were told that 1 year ago, a supermoon triggered a global event. 1 billion people turned into werewolves overnight, and tonight the supermoon returns. Which is confusing because I had to look up what a supermoon is, and it's not an official term, but I guess it's basically like, and the film doesn't tell us this, but it's when, I want to say when the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie.
Kind of. That's amore.
Well, what is it? Porigi? Or
yeah.
Whatever the term is.
Pierogi.
It's when a full moon is closest to Earth, which is what is explained in the film, that a supermoon is when the moon is closest to Earth. And that it happens several times a year. But we're told it's like a year later. So I'm a little confused with, well, what happened with the other supermoons? But anyway, Lou Diamond Phillips plays like Dr. Fauci. And he's assembled this team of scientists. Frank Grillo plays a molecular biologist. I'm not laughing because he couldn't be one, but the way it's played seems more like likely than not likely that he would be. But anyway, they've developed something called moon screen. So like sunscreen for the moonlight.
Yeah.
And the only way they can test it is with an actual supermoon. So the film is like on this night when I guess the CDC is going to test moon screen. It's also like The Purge because we're told that all emergency services are down from sunset to sunrise.
So everybody should just stay inside and don't expose yourself to the moon.
But of course, no one can stay their asses inside because we're mainly focused on Frank Grillo's family. And his family is his sister-in-law and his niece because his brother was killed in that first incident. So he's very concerned about his sister-in-law, played by
Ilfenesh Hadera, who's very beautiful.
A stunningly beautiful woman.
But
this character and that performance...
playing somebody that's, I guess you don't want to survive. I don't know.
Well, we can talk more about it. She was very frustrating to me. But after the experiment happens, which is that the moon screen is applied to these people who have volunteered to be, they're held in these cages and then like the top of the building opens up to expose them to the super moonlight, they start to change and everything goes left because they break out of their cages and destroy everyone.
Yeah.
So the next hour of the movie is Frank Grillo and his colleague, another scientist, this lady.
Amy, played by Katrina Law.
It's just them running in these streets trying to get to safety, but also Frank trying to get back to his family's house. And it's important to know there's a neighbor.
Cody.
This guy who reminded me of David Harbour.
Yeah, he's like B-grade David Harbour. I think that character was supposed to be played by Jonathan Sheck, because that's who's listed as Cody on Letterboxd, but it's not Mr. Sheck.
And he's like this nationalist who's watching too much news, and because there's this rhetoric about maybe the only people who turned, because of course the opening of the film is like some person, somehow Lou Diamond Phillips as like Dr. Fauci is giving this interview to I don't know whom, and because he's looking directly in the camera, but also to someone else. There's like someone calling in asking like, well, why now? We've had many supermoons for, eons. Why now? And he can't answer that. But there's this idea that maybe like bad people.
Yeah, the people who, I guess, I was surprised there wasn't more Mark of the Beast rhetoric those are the people that are changing into werewolves. But
this neighbor, Cody, he is like, going to he's going to stand his ground. And the final showdown is that he turns into a werewolf, this neighbor, and Frank Grillo gets home to protect his family and also turns into a werewolf. They fight each other. Of course, Frank kills the neighbor.
Rips his head off.
But now he breaks into his family's house, and right as he's about to kill his sister-in-law, she has the bright idea to shoot open a window to allow the sunlight to come in.
That sun zoomed right up in the sky.
The end. Well, not the end, because she's looking at her brother-in-law, because now we see, Frank Grillo has to have a shirtless scene. So in the end, when he transitions back to human, he's shirtless.
But pants are still on.
Looking great.
Sweaty.
And his sister-in-law is looking at him like,
let's get it on.
The end. Okay. Can we start with the ending? Because I'm confused. I guess I didn't know part of the lore of werewolves is that they turn back when the sunlight hits them.
Yeah.
Like I would have assumed it was just like a timer.
Like vampires.
Yeah, so I didn't realize, which of course we just watched the new Nosferatu, the Robert Eggers movie. And it's not a spoiler because it's a remake of two other movies. That's how the vampire dies at the end of that movie, is that the sunlight hits him. So it reminded me of that.
I think once the power of the moon, once that goes away, then they change back. But
that was silly.
Or when they die. But
anyway,
this feels very dumb in the tradition of like Geostorm or Moonfall, but with werewolves.
And the production value is not that high.
No, and there's a lot going on, really.
There is a lot going on.
There's car crashes. There's all I guess credit to the director then for
shoving a bunch of stuff in here.
Shoving a bunch of stuff in here, but to distract you from the fact that this is really dumb.
So the center where I don't know what it is, the CDC is performing this experiment, they have these people who have volunteered to turn, and they're all wearing these really big collars around their neck. I mean, the collars are huge. Like you could easily just take it off, but they're making them big to accommodate for when they transition. Didn't that just look so silly?
It looked dumb. Yeah.
It just looks so silly. But the transitioning into the werewolves running around. We have a few scenes of like werewolves standing. Like there's one in particular, because it's like a flashback to the first time when this blonde young lady is standing in her house looking for her mom. And it looks like her mom is transitioned, and we see a werewolf like in the kitchen lurking. Very effective. And I thought, isn't it a shame that this weren't something a little more like 80s inspired, like creature feature. I was kind of like, I mean, this is the movie we got, but wouldn't it have been cool to make it more like some college students develop some science that is causing this transition on the night of a supermoon? And they keep it contained to like this campus.
Like Flatliners.
Because the problem with this movie is they make it a global issue, but this movie feels so small.
It does. It definitely does.
It feels so small.
And then again, I like Frank Grillo. Looks incredible, but like going back to 80s inspired, say like a Snake Plissken, like Kurt Russell. Like there's some, Kurt Russell had some swagger, and he's not dead behind the eyes, but he just seems really like, I'm just here to get through this. That's what it feels like. Like I don't know that there's any acting involved with the performance.
No, which is interesting because you have the neighbor Cody really playing it up. Then you have the sister-in-law. Is her name Lucy?
Yes.
She...
Oh my God, sobbing. Just distressed.
So another thing that didn't make sense to me is, okay, so we know that this is coming. We know that this purge situation is coming. The opening of the film is Lucy and Frank trying to prepare the house, barricaded up. Child, the minute the change happens and someone knocks on her door, it's like someone she recognizes.
Reagan, the girl from next door from the kitchen.
And because they have all the surveillance set up. What's the first thing she wants to do? Open the damn door. And she's on the phone with Frank, who's already seen that like shit is going left. Do not open that door. And she's hysterical. Mm-hmm. Like she's gonna open it. And then right as she's about to get up to open it, she sees in the surveillance that a werewolf kills Reagan. But it just seems like this lady is so unprepared, and she's playing this like so overly emotional.
Oh yes. Well, she keeps talking to herself like, you're a survivor, you can do it. It's like, okay. But then the house, so they barricade the house. Frank Grillo puts up some bricks, which he himself immediately busts through as a werewolf. like y'all had how much time to prepare? Everybody should be living in compounds until we figure this out.
Right. The scene when a werewolf first gets into the house, though, Lucy and her daughter. The daughter's really cute. She has beautiful hair. And the daughter sprays a werewolf with mace.
Yeah, they have pepper spray. Mm-hmm.
Or pepper spray. And then Lucy grabs an axe. But I thought that scene was crunchy because it takes Lucy a long time. Because she grabs the axe as this werewolf is about to devour her child. And then she takes the time to like get into a stance to like properly swing. I just don't think that the action of it all is very compelling. Mm-hmm. It did feel tedious for 45 minutes of just watching, because we also see Frank Grillo and his colleague driving around the city, and it just looks like they're on one street going in circles, and there are people with machine guns.
Yeah, there's all these rebels. But the part with the axe is like, you really just need to Lizzie Borden this wolf, okay? Just start hacking.
At the end, when Frank, as the werewolf, breaks into the house, you said something funny because he's wearing his dog tag, and the dog tag is really loose on the werewolf. So right. How loose would it have been on him?
Right. Yeah, there are too many details that are missed. But it did remind me of that one of Neil Marshall. Was it his debut? One of his first films was Dog Soldiers, which I think this film is trying to have that kind of energy. And I haven't seen that in years, but I remember Dog Soldiers being a lot more fun.
Well, then this idea, because again, it could have been fun to play with how, doing something new with the genre of werewolves. Maybe we could have played with the idea of how aware is like the individual who's transitioned. Because when Frank Grillo comes into the house as a werewolf and is about to kill his sister-in-law, she grabs a family portrait and is like pleading to him, like, you know us, like you don't want to do this.
That's so
and it
dumb.
would seem that he recognizes it, but then immediately goes to attack the daughter. So it's like, well, what's his consciousness like? Because he knew to defend his family from the neighbor. Because these wolves aren't fighting. When we see them all out with each other, they're not fighting each other.
No.
So he knew to fight this werewolf.
Well, even the neighbor, like Cody is, whose little stupid vest that says wolf killer, is still also on this werewolf body, which should have busted right off. But I guess that's to differentiate them in the fight scene. But he just seems to be intent on terrorizing his neighbors. So,
because in the beginning he kind of ridiculed Frank Grillo. Mm-hmm. Like, you're not doing what you're not protecting your family like you should. If you would have, your brother wouldn't be dead now.
But Cody is in the background with a semi-automatic, just shooting at werewolf pictures, and it's like the middle of the day, and it's like, one, you're wasting bullets. Don't you need to keep those for tonight? And also, like, it's a residential neighborhood. What are you doing?
The dialogue, there are moments when it's pretty crunchy too. Like, there's a moment one of the scientists is talking about one of the people who's changing, and she's like, he's an addict without a fix.
Oh, wow.
And then Frank Grillo has a couple of moments where he tells one wolf, bite me, and then another wolf, come fetch.
Those are very Arnold Schwarzenegger type moments, like in Eraser when he shoots the alligator and he's like, your luggage or something, like, okay. But speaking of the consciousness or self-awareness, like I just rewatched Silver Bullet like 2 weeks ago, the Stephen King adaptation with Gary Busey, and Everett McGill is that werewolf, and he is targeting, like he knows who knows about him, and he's going after little Corey Haim.
Oh, sure. Yeah. My final note was when the sister-in-law shoots the window out and the sunlight changes Frank Grillo. You started singing The Morning After. I thought that would have been the perfect soundtrack choice.
That made me want to rewatch that Jane Fonda and Jeff Bridges movie, The Morning After. Anyway, my dad used to sing that song and make fun of it all the time when I was a kid.
Well, sorry to Stephen C. Miller. I did not enjoy this movie.
No.
What would you give Werewolves?
I think I'm being nicer to it than you are, because I think the werewolves look really good. Werewolves. 2. I'm giving it 2.
I would give it 1.5 out of 5. Aside from the cool practical effects, this story feels very generic and nonsensical.
It is.
And they've definitely bit off more than they could chew. Join us on Patreon and listen to our podcast. Bye.